Crawl if you want food, my grandson mocked, his voice cutting through the quiet of my kitchen like a knife. He stood over me with a cruel smirk, his sneaker nudging the plate just out of reach. My knees ached from the cold linoleum as I stared at him in disbelief, the boy I once cradled in my arms now grinning at my weakness. I hadn't asked for much, just a little help with groceries, but he thought it was funny to watch me struggle. My own flesh and blood, treating me like I was nothing more than a burden. I remember how the light from the overhead bulb flickered that night, buzzing faintly, the shadows of his face stretching long across the wall. He looked taller, sharper, like a stranger wearing my grandson's skin. I should have cried, but instead, I felt something deeper coil inside me. I stayed on the floor, watching him walk away with the plate of food I had cooked for both of us, and in that moment, I made a promise. He would regret the day he turned his cruelty into a game. You see, I wasn't always this frail old woman he thought he could push around. I had lived 78 years, fought through poverty, buried my husband, raised 2 children alone, and built a small fortune brick by brick. My late husband Henry and I had saved, invested, and built properties that had grown into a portfolio my children never had to worry about. But somewhere along the line, that security became an expectation. And to my grandson Adam, it became entitlement. Adam had been the golden boy of the family. Handsome, athletic, clever when he wanted to be. But cleverness without discipline is a dangerous thing. He learned quickly how to manipulate, how to smile just enough to get what he wanted. His mother, my daughter, passed away young, and perhaps I spoiled him too much, trying to fill the void. But what was once love turned into arrogance. He began to see my money as his inheritance, not my security. And when he realized I wasn't handing it over easily, his visits changed. They weren't about family anymore, they were inspections, measuring how close he was to what he thought would one day be his. That night, when he told me to crawl, he didn't know I was listening with more than my ears. I was storing every word, every sneer, every look of disdain. His cruelty wasn't just carelessness, it was strategy. He thought if he humiliated me enough, I'd bend. That I'd give in out of fear of being left alone. What he didn't know was that while my knees may have touched the floor, my mind was standing tall, sharper than it had ever been. I waited until he left, his laughter still echoing as the front door slammed. The silence afterward was thick, heavy. I pulled myself up with the help of the counter and stood there in the dim light, hands gripping the wood as if it were the only thing holding me upright. I thought of Henry. He had always told me, Ruth, money is both a blessing and a curse. It will take care of you, but it will also make people show their true colors. That night, I saw Adam's true colors painted in bold strokes. He didn't see me as his grandmother. He saw me as a vault that hadn't opened fast enough. The next morning, I dressed myself in my navy cardigan and walked with my cane to the study. Dust lay thick on the mahogany desk, but the files inside were pristine. Contracts, deeds, trusts, all the documents Adam had never bothered to ask about because he assumed they'd eventually land in his lap. I spent hours going through them, sipping bitter coffee, my hands steady despite the memories of the night before. Every paper I touched felt like a weapon, every clause a shield. Henry and I had prepared well, but now it was time to sharpen the edges. Later that week, Adam came back, this time with less mockery but more calculation. He brought flowers, cheap ones from the grocery store, and set them on the table as if that erased what had happened. "Grandma," he said smoothly, "I was just joking the other night. You know I didn't mean it." He slid into the chair across from me, his smile wide, his phone buzzing in his pocket. But I saw the way his eyes lingered on the drawers behind me, the ones where I had kept our documents for decades. His apology wasn't for me, it was for his timeline. He needed to soften me again, to keep the path clear for his inheritance. I didn't argue. I didn't call him out. I simply smiled faintly, the kind of smile that looks forgiving but hides an entire storm behind it. Let him think he still had control. Sometimes silence is more powerful than confrontation. He left later that evening, confident I was still his to manipulate. He didn't notice the way I had moved the keys to the safe, the way I had shifted accounts into trusts he couldn't touch, the way I had started making calls to old friends with powerful positions. Adam thought he was winning, but every visit, every cruel word, was stacking the deck in my favor. One night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, brushing back my silver hair, and I asked myself, why had I allowed him so close for so long? Was it guilt, for losing his mother too soon? Was it loneliness, needing someone, even the wrong someone, to fill the house? Or was it pride, believing I could shape him into a man of honor when all he cared about was money? Whatever the answer, the truth was clear now. Adam had crossed a line. And I was done protecting him. The opportunity came faster than I expected. A week later, Adam arrived with a folder. He laid it on the table with a grand flourish, like a magician revealing a trick. "Grandma," he said, "this will make everything easier for you. Just some routine papers. A power of attorney, nothing serious. It just gives me the ability to help with finances, in case anything ever happens to you. You trust me, don't you?" His tone was smooth, but his hands betrayed him. They fidgeted, restless, eager. I looked at the folder without touching it, my face calm, my eyes steady. I thought of the night on the kitchen floor, of his mocking voice telling me to crawl, and I felt that same coil tighten in my chest. "Leave it here," I said softly. "I'll look it over." His smile grew, but he didn't know that the moment he walked out the door, I would be on the phone with my attorney. When the house was quiet again, I opened the folder. The words were clear. Adam wanted full control. He hadn't even bothered to disguise it well. All he needed was my signature, and he could drain everything Henry and I had built. My jaw clenched as I traced the lines with my finger. He thought he was clever, thought my age made me blind. But what he didn't realize was that age sharpens memory, and I had been trained by life to see through lies quicker than most. That night, I sat by the window as the moonlight washed over the garden Henry had planted. I whispered to him, like I often did when I needed strength. "He thinks I'm weak, Henry. He thinks I'll give in. But I won't. I'll make sure he learns what true weakness feels like. I'll make him crawl, not for food, but for mercy." I closed the folder, locked it away, and picked up the phone. It was time to begin the real game. Adam thought he had me cornered. He came to my house every other day after leaving that folder, asking casually if I'd had the chance to sign yet. He tried to be sweet, carrying in grocery bags, pretending to fix a loose hinge, cracking jokes as though his cruelty had never happened. But every word he spoke, every fake smile, every false kindness dripped with expectation. He wanted me to fold. He wanted me to give in. I didn't. I nodded politely, played the fragile grandmother role he had assigned me. I even let him carry my cane once, pretending my knees hurt too much to walk from the kitchen to the living room. He looked so smug, so sure that I was deteriorating right in front of his eyes. What he didn't know was that I was recording him. Every time he spoke about the papers, every time he hinted that it would be easier if I just handed things over, my phone on the counter was capturing it all. Meanwhile, I had my attorney, Daniel Hayes, working late into the night. Daniel was young compared to me, barely in his 40s, but sharp, meticulous, and utterly loyal once he realized who I really was. When I told him I wanted every loophole in my will closed, every trust airtight, every account locked from manipulation, he didn't hesitate. "You're planning something bigger than just protecting your assets," he said one evening, sliding a thick file across his oak desk. I leaned on my cane and looked him in the eye. Adam mocked me on my kitchen floor. He told me to crawl if I wanted food. That boy needs to understand that greed has consequences. Daniel sat back, his face unreadable for a moment, then nodded. "Then we'll make sure he learns that lesson in court." We prepared everything quietly, weaving a web Adam couldn't see. Meanwhile, Adam grew bolder. He stopped knocking before entering my home, walking in like he already owned the place. He began rearranging furniture, telling me it was for my safety. He moved my favorite armchair from the window to a corner, claiming I'd trip over the rug. He even started handling my mail, saying he was just trying to help. One afternoon, I came into the kitchen to find him rifling through the drawer where I used to keep important documents. He jumped when he saw me, covering his shock with a laugh. "Just looking for a pen, Grandma. Don't worry about it." I said nothing. I simply watched him, my silence heavier than any scolding could have been. But inside, my anger simmered. He had stripped away respect, stripped away kindness, and now he was trying to strip away my very autonomy. The boy I once rocked to sleep was treating me like I was already gone. The turning point came 2 weeks later. He arrived in a crisp gray suit, a smug smile plastered across his face. "Grandma," he said, dropping the folder on the table again, "I've been patient." "Really, I have. But this can't wait any longer. You're making things complicated when they don't have to be." I tilted my head. Complicated. Yes, he snapped. Do you know how much time I waste coming here, reminding you, checking on you? If you just signed these papers, I could handle everything. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. But no, you want to make this difficult. His eyes hardened, the mask slipping. Why? Why can't you just trust me? I studied him for a long moment, then asked quietly, what would you do, Adam, if you had everything you wanted? What would you do if all of this, I waved at the house, was yours tomorrow? He grinned, teeth flashing. I'd sell it. Buy something modern. This place smells like mothballs. The words pierced deeper than he knew. This wasn't just a house. This was where Henry and I built our lives. Where my children took their first steps. Where I survived grief, celebrated birthdays, cooked Sunday dinners. And he would throw it away for something modern. That night, after he stormed out when I refused again, I sat at my desk and opened a small wooden box Henry had once given me. Inside was his old fountain pen, the one he used to sign our first mortgage papers. I held it in my hands, and a thought crystallized in my mind. Adam wanted my signature so badly, but it wouldn't be the one he expected. The next day, I visited Daniel again. I signed new documents, updated trusts, an altered will, and one very special clause that ensured Adam would inherit nothing unless he passed a moral character review in court. It was unusual, yes, but legally sound. He would have to stand before a judge and prove himself worthy. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're going to make him crawl. I smiled faintly. Exactly. Weeks passed, and Adam grew frustrated. His visits turned into arguments, his patience unraveling. One evening, he slammed his fist on the kitchen table so hard the dishes rattled. You're doing this on purpose. You think this is funny? Do you want me to beg? I looked at him evenly. Maybe. His face twisted, red with rage. Fine. Don't sign. But don't expect me to keep coming around. You'll be on your own. And when you can't handle it anymore, you'll come crawling to me. I let him storm out, his words still hanging in the air like smoke. 2 days later, he filed a petition in court. He wanted me declared unfit, just as my son-in-law once had. He wanted control transferred by law, using my age and supposed frailty as weapons. He thought he had the upper hand, thought the system would bend to his will. But what he didn't know was that I had been preparing for this exact moment. The morning of the first hearing, I dressed carefully. Silver hair brushed neatly back. Dark green dress, pearl earrings. I stood before the mirror, cane in hand, and whispered to my reflection, let him think he's won. Today he learns. The courthouse loomed tall as I climbed its steps slowly but steadily. Inside, Adam was already seated at the petitioner's table, his suit immaculate, his expression smug. He barely glanced at me as I walked past, as if I were already defeated. The judge entered, a stern man in his 60s with sharp eyes. We are here to review the petition regarding Mrs. Ruth Morgan's competence to manage her affairs, he began. Adam's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client has ample reason to believe his grandmother is no longer able to care for herself. She has exhibited confusion, difficulty managing finances, and resistance to reasonable support. We request that power of attorney be granted to Mr. Adam Morgan immediately. I sat still, hands folded, face calm. Then my lawyer, Daniel, rose. Your Honor, this is not a case of an elderly woman in decline. This is a case of financial exploitation and coercion. We have recordings, documents, and testimony that will reveal the petitioner's true intentions. Adam smirked, but it faltered when Daniel placed a small recorder on the table. The same recorder that had captured Adam mocking me, telling me to crawl if I wanted food. The judge leaned forward as the audio played, the cruel laughter echoing in the silent courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously, heads turning toward Adam. His face turned pale, then red. Out of context, he stammered. It was a joke. The judge silenced him with a raised hand. Enough. We will continue tomorrow. I want all evidence presented in full. As I rose to leave, Adam glared at me, his teeth clenched. You think this will stop me? You think anyone cares about an old woman's pride? I leaned close, my voice a whisper only he could hear. Pride? No, Adam. This is about justice. And tomorrow, You'll crawl in front of everyone. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed like a hive before I even stepped through the doors. Word had spread quickly after the recording was played. Grandson tells grandmother to crawl for food. Reporters lined the entrance, shouting questions, their cameras flashing in bursts of white light. I kept my head high, my cane steady, and walked right past them. Let Adam enjoy the attention for now. By the end, it would bury him. Inside, the tension was thicker than smoke. Adam sat at the petitioner's table in a crisp blue suit, his jaw tight, his eyes darting nervously toward the benches filled with onlookers. The arrogance he once wore like a crown was cracking at the edges. But even as the judge took his seat, Adam leaned back with forced ease, as though trying to reclaim control. Mr. Morgan, the judge said, his voice deep and steady, yesterday we heard a troubling recording. Today, we will examine further evidence. I remind both parties that decorum must be maintained. Daniel rose first. He carried a folder so thick it seemed to bow in his hands. Your Honor, he began, what we're dealing with is not the decline of a loving grandmother, but the systematic attempt of a grandson to exploit her financially. We have documents showing his repeated efforts to gain power of attorney, bank records revealing unauthorized inquiries, and witness statements that prove he intended to force Mrs. Morgan into dependency. Adam's lawyer jumped up, waving his hand. Objection. This is character assassination. My client has only ever acted with concern for his grandmother's well-being. The judge's gavel struck once. Sit down. We'll hear the evidence. Daniel handed copies to the clerk. Your Honor, Exhibit A, a series of text messages sent from Adam Morgan to his friends. In them, he refers to his grandmother not as family, but as the jackpot. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I didn't flinch, but inside my chest, a small piece of me ached. To him, I wasn't Ruth. I wasn't the woman who tucked him into bed after nightmares, who baked him birthday cakes, who paid for his college tuition. I was the jackpot. The texts appeared on the projection screen for all to see. Once I get her to sign, it's game over. Finally rich. Another, old bat is too stubborn. Might need to scare her a little. Claire, my daughter's sister-in-law who had come to watch quietly from the gallery, pressed a hand over her mouth in shock. I heard whispers ripple behind me. Adam's face turned crimson. He whispered fiercely to his lawyer, who stood and stammered about youthful exaggeration, and taken out of context. But the judge's expression was grim. Proceed, he said to Daniel. Next came the bank records. Unauthorized access attempts, traced back to Adam's laptop. Daniel's voice was steady as he presented each piece, building a wall of evidence brick by brick. Adam shifted in his seat, his polished exterior slipping further. Finally, Daniel turned to me. Mrs. Morgan, would you please take the stand? The courtroom hushed as I walked slowly to the witness box, cane tapping softly on the wood floor. I raised my hand, swore the oath, and sat tall. Mrs. Morgan, Daniel began, can you tell the court in your own words what happened the night your grandson mocked you? I took a deep breath, letting my eyes sweep across the room before landing on Adam. I had cooked dinner. A simple meal, roast chicken, vegetables, and bread. When I asked for a plate, Adam slid it away from me and said, crawl if you want food. I was on my knees, reaching for the plate when he laughed and walked away. That was the moment I realized he no longer saw me as his grandmother. He saw me as an obstacle standing between him and money. The gallery murmured, some shaking their heads in disgust. Adam shifted uncomfortably, his face twisted in anger. Mrs. Morgan, Daniel continued, did you ever give Adam permission to access your financial accounts? No, I said firmly. Not once. Every attempt he made was against my wishes. And when I refused to sign his papers, he tried to intimidate me, telling me accidents could happen, that people might start thinking I was forgetful. Adam's lawyer sprang up. Objection. Hearsay. Daniel smiled faintly. We have recordings. The judge nodded. Overruled. Daniel pressed further. Mrs. Morgan, how did you respond to Adam's intimidation? I straightened my back, my voice calm but unwavering. I prepared. I gathered documents, recordings, and witnesses. I made sure that when the time came, Adam would not only fail to take my inheritance but would be forced to face the consequences of his greed. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with finality. Adam's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to poke holes in my memory. Mrs. Morgan, isn't it true you sometimes forget things? Your neighbor testified that you left your gate unlocked. I looked him straight in the eye. I left it open for the mailman. Once. I remember because Adam mocked me for it the very same day. Laughter erupted softly in the gallery. The lawyer faltered, flipping through his notes. And isn't it true, he pressed, that you rely heavily on others for day-to-day needs? I leaned forward, my eyes sharp. I rely on no one. I may use a cane, but my mind is as sharp as the day I started my career. And unlike Adam, I do not lie, cheat, or steal. The lawyer stuttered, then sat down quickly. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I caught Adam's glare. His lips moved silently, "You'll pay for this." But the truth was clear, he was the one drowning. The judge called a recess. I walked into the hallway, the crowd parting as whispers followed me. A reporter leaned close, her voice low. "Mrs. Morgan, what do you hope to achieve from this trial?" I looked straight ahead, my words deliberate. Justice. Not just for me, but for every elder who has ever been mocked, manipulated, or made to feel small. Let them know we do not crawl. The words spread quickly. Within hours, they were quoted in headlines. "We do not crawl. Grandmother takes grandson to court." That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the lamp casting warm light over the same wooden surface where Adam once humiliated me. I thought of Henry again, his steady hands, his quiet wisdom. "You'd be proud of me," I whispered. But I also knew this wasn't over. Adam wasn't finished. Men like him never go down quietly. The next day in court, Adam's lawyer tried a new strategy. He painted me as a manipulator, claiming I had turned against my own blood out of spite. "Mrs. Morgan has a history of control," he said, his voice oily. "She likes to hold the purse strings tightly. My client is simply trying to ensure she has the care she needs." The judge glanced at me, but I stayed still. Let him spin his lies. Daniel would unravel them. And unravel he did. He presented a series of witness statements from Adam's old friends, boys who had once played basketball with him, who now admitted Adam had bragged for years about waiting for Grandma to die so he'd cash in. One even testified that Adam had joked about speeding things up. The courtroom buzzed with outrage. The judge's gavel struck. "Order. Order." Adam sat frozen, his face pale, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. By the end of the day, it was clear, the tide had turned. The evidence was damning, the witnesses credible. Adam was no longer the golden boy, he was the predator exposed. As the judge adjourned for the evening, he looked directly at Adam. "Mr. Morgan, tomorrow we will hear closing arguments. I suggest you prepare yourself." The gallery emptied, footsteps echoing on the marble floor. I walked slowly toward the exit, cane tapping steadily. Adam lingered near the doorway, his face twisted with fury. "You think you've won, old woman," he hissed, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "You think this is over? I'll ruin you. I'll make you wish you never fought me." I leaned in, my voice calm, almost gentle. "No, Adam. You already ruined yourself the day you told me to crawl." And with that, I walked past him, my head high, my heart steady. Tomorrow would be the day he finally learned what it meant to crawl, not in my kitchen, but in front of the entire court. The courthouse was overflowing the next morning. Every bench was filled, reporters packed along the back wall, their pens scratching feverishly. The whispers of the Kroll case had spread far beyond town, people wanted to see how it would end. I arrived early, my dark green dress pressed, pearl earrings glinting softly, cane tapping against the polished marble. I walked with deliberate steadiness, never rushing, never faltering. Age may have bent my body, but it had sharpened my will. Adam sat at the petitioner's table, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. His suit was pressed, but his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. The boy who once mocked me now looked like a man cornered. He tried to smile when he saw me, but the edges of his mouth twitched nervously. He knew what was coming. The judge entered, the gavel struck, and silence blanketed the room. "We are here today for closing arguments," he said. "Both sides will present, and then this court will deliver its ruling." Adam's lawyer stood first, his voice rehearsed, his tone slick. "Your Honor, this case has been twisted by emotion. Yes, my client used words he regrets. Who among us has not spoken cruelly in frustration? But the fact remains, Mrs. Morgan is 78 years old. She cannot manage the complexities of modern finances. My client only wished to ensure her safety, her well-being. This is not exploitation. This is family responsibility. His words slithered across the courtroom like smoke, but I saw how the jurors shifted uncomfortably, how even the judge's brow furrowed. The evidence had been too heavy, the cruelty too blatant. Then Daniel rose. He didn't carry a folder this time. He didn't need one. His voice was steady, his words precise. Your Honor, this case is not about age. It is not about a grandmother's frailty. It is about greed, manipulation, and cruelty. Adam Morgan mocked his grandmother, told her to crawl for food, then tried to strip her of everything she had built. He filed a petition to declare her unfit, not because she is incapable, but because she refused to give him what he wanted. The evidence is undeniable, the texts calling her the jackpot, the bank records, the recordings of threats. This is not love. This is predation. He paused, letting the words settle. The gallery was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the old courtroom clock. Mrs. Morgan, Daniel continued, is not a victim. She is a survivor. And today, she deserves justice. He sat down, his hands folded calmly. The judge leaned forward, his eyes sweeping from Adam to me. He began to speak, but then he stopped. His words caught in his throat, his eyes narrowing as though recognition flickered across his face. Mrs. Morgan, he said slowly, would you please step forward? I rose, cane tapping against the wood, and approached the bench. The judge studied me, his face unreadable. I know you, he said at last. His voice carried not just surprise, but awe. You're Ruth Morgan. You testified in the Franklin Industries case 20 years ago. You're the one who dismantled their fraud scheme. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Even Adam's lawyer froze, his mouth hanging open. The judge continued, his voice steadier now. I remember your testimony. I was a young prosecutor then. You traced millions in hidden accounts with nothing but ledgers and patience. I never forgot it. Adam's face drained of all color. His eyes darted toward me, wide with shock. He had thought I was just a frail old woman, someone easy to push aside. But now the truth stood in front of him. I was the woman who had toppled giants long before he was even grown. I inclined my head slightly. Yes, Your Honor. That was me. The gallery erupted in whispers. She's that Ruth Morgan. The fraud investigator. No wonder she had everything prepared. The judge rapped his gavel for silence, but a faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Then I know exactly what kind of mind I'm dealing with. Thank you, Mrs. Morgan. You may return to your seat. I turned slowly, meeting Adam's eyes as I walked back. His jaw hung slack, his hands trembling. He had never known this part of me. To him, I had always just been Grandma, the woman who baked cookies, who sent birthday cards, who gave him money when he was broke. He never imagined that beneath the cardigan and cane was the same woman who had helped put corrupt executives in prison. The judge cleared his throat, his voice solemn. Having reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the conduct displayed in this courtroom, the petition is denied. Furthermore, this court finds sufficient grounds to refer Mr. Adam Morgan to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of attempted financial exploitation of an elder. The gavel struck. It was over. Adam shot to his feet, shouting, "This isn't fair. She's manipulating you. She's lying." His voice cracked, desperation spilling out like water from a broken dam. Two bailiffs moved quickly, gripping his arms. He fought against them, but his struggles looked pitiful now, an arrogant boy exposed, forced to face what he had tried to escape. The gallery watched in stunned silence as he shouted, "You'll regret this, Grandma. You'll regret." His voice was cut off as the bailiffs dragged him toward the exit. I didn't move. I sat still, my hands folded neatly, my eyes calm. The judge's final words echoed in my ears, attempted financial exploitation of an elder. Adam hadn't just lost his chance at my inheritance. He had destroyed his own future. After court adjourned, I walked slowly into the hallway. Cameras flashed, microphones extended toward me. "Mrs. Morgan, what do you have to say about today's ruling?" I paused, turning my gaze toward the reporters. My grandson told me to crawl for food. Today, he crawled in front of the court. Let this be a lesson: age is not weakness. We may walk slower, but we still stand tall. The hallway erupted in questions, but I walked past them, cane tapping with dignity. Claire approached me outside the courthouse steps, her eyes filled with tears. She had sat silently through the trial, torn between blood and truth, but now she reached for my hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I didn't see it before. I didn't see what he'd become." I squeezed her hand gently. "You see it now. That's enough." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the courthouse, I felt something lift from my chest. The humiliation of that night in the kitchen, his cruel words, the sting of betrayal, all of it had been answered. He had mocked me, reduced me, treated me as less than human. And now, the whole world knew who he truly was. But even as victory settled over me, I knew the story wasn't over. Adam still had to face the district attorney. He still had to live with the weight of his exposure. And I still had to decide what would become of the inheritance he once believed was his by right. For now, though, I let myself breathe. For the first time in months, I felt free. The gavel's echo still rang in my ears as I left the courthouse that day, but I knew the story wasn't finished. The judge's ruling had denied Adam's petition and referred him to the district attorney, but consequences are never instant. They come slowly, like a tide creeping higher and higher until it swallows the shore. And I was ready to watch that tide drown the boy who had once laughed as I reached for food on my knees. For days afterward, reporters hounded me. They parked near my house, waiting for me to emerge, calling questions from behind cameras. Headlines filled newspapers and online feeds. Grandson tells grandmother to crawl, gets exposed in court. Fraud investigator emerges from retirement to defeat family betrayal. Justice for Ruth Morgan: age is not weakness. The world loved the story. To them, I was a symbol, an old woman standing tall against cruelty. They didn't know the ache in my knees each morning, or the lonely nights when silence pressed down like a weight. They saw the victory, not the scars. But that was all right. Let them take inspiration. Let them remember that dignity doesn't die with age. Adam, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. He was released on bail, waiting for formal charges, but the smugness was gone. Neighbors whispered about seeing him slouching toward his car, hood pulled low, face pale. His friends, those who once bragged with him about the jackpot, had abandoned him. No one wants to stand near a man branded with shame. Claire came to visit me 2 weeks later. She sat in the armchair he once tried to move, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Mom," she said softly, "I don't know how to make this right. He was my son. I raised him after my sister died. I thought love would be enough. I didn't see what he was becoming." I looked at her, my daughter, worn by guilt she didn't deserve. "Claire, you tried. But Adam made his choices. You cannot carry his sins." Tears filled her eyes. Do you still plan to cut him off completely?" I leaned on my cane, rising slowly. I walked to the bookshelf where Henry's photo rested, his warm smile frozen in time. Henry and I built our life with sweat and sacrifice. We meant for it to protect this family, not to poison it. Adam wanted to use it as a weapon. No, he cannot have it. But it doesn't mean it will go to waste. Claire's brows furrowed. "Then what will you do?" I didn't answer then. Because the truth was still forming inside me, heavy and certain. The trial against Adam moved quickly. The district attorney, emboldened by the mountain of evidence Daniel and I had prepared, pressed charges for attempted exploitation, fraud, and coercion. I didn't attend every hearing, my presence wasn't needed, but when the sentencing day came, I was there. The courtroom was smaller, less crowded than before, but the weight of justice was just as thick. Adam stood at the defendant's table, his suit ill-fitting, his eyes hollow. He looked less like the golden grandson and more like a man who had aged 10 years in just a few months. The prosecutor spoke of greed, of betrayal, of deliberate cruelty. Adam's lawyer begged for leniency, claiming youthful arrogance, poor judgment, desperation. Then Adam himself was asked to speak. He stood, shoulders hunched, hands shaking. His voice was low, ragged. I don't know what to say. I thought money would fix everything. I thought it was my right. I see now what I've done, but his eyes flickered toward me, full of something I couldn't quite name. Not love, not remorse. Perhaps just shame. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't know how to be without what I thought I'd have. The judge's voice was firm when he delivered the sentence: probation, mandatory financial ethics classes, community service at a shelter for the elderly. It wasn't prison, but it was enough to brand him with a permanent record, enough to shatter the image he once carried of himself. And as he turned to leave, escorted by officers, his eyes met mine. For a brief second, I thought I saw that boy again, the one I once held on my lap, the one who asked me to read him stories. But the moment passed. He looked away. Afterward, I walked slowly out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun. Reporters crowded near, but I raised a hand. No more statements, I said. The court has spoken. But there was still one statement left to make, and it would not be to the press. That night, I sat at my desk with Henry's fountain pen in my hand. The inheritance that Adam had tried to seize, the houses, the accounts, the investments, would not rot. It would not sit waiting for another greedy hand. I rewrote my will once again, transferring the bulk of it to a foundation in my name. The Ruth Morgan Foundation. Its mission: to protect elders from exploitation, to provide legal aid for those who couldn't afford it, to make sure no one else ever had to crawl for dignity. I felt Henry's presence in the room as the ink dried. This was what our fortune was meant for. Not a selfish boy, but something larger, something lasting. Weeks later, the foundation opened quietly, no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no fanfare. Just a small office with determined people and a purpose sharper than any sword. But word spread, as it always does. Soon, elders and families came forward with their stories, seeking help. And each time, I felt the sting of Adam's cruelty transform into strength. One afternoon, I visited the shelter where Adam was assigned community service. I didn't announce myself, I simply walked in, cane tapping against the tile. He was there, folding laundry alongside volunteers. He looked thinner, tired, his shoulders heavy. When he saw me, his eyes widened, and he froze. I said nothing at first, just studied him. Then I spoke softly. "Do you understand now?" He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Yes, I do." I nodded once. "Good. Because this is your chance, Adam. You may never touch a penny of my inheritance, but you can still learn what it means to serve others. Don't waste it." He lowered his head, silent. I turned and left, the sound of my cane echoing behind me. As the months rolled into a year, peace returned to my home. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like mine again. I tended Henry's garden, brewed tea in the mornings, and sat in my favorite armchair by the window. But I was not the same woman I had been before Adam's betrayal. I was sharper, fiercer, more alive. Age had not erased me, it had revealed me. The foundation grew, expanding to other towns, building partnerships. Letters poured in, thanking me for what we had built. Some called me an inspiration. I didn't think of myself that way. I thought of myself as a woman who refused to crawl. One evening, Claire came over with her youngest daughter. The little girl ran through the house, laughing, her pigtails bouncing. Claire sat across from me, her eyes soft. "Mom," she said, "I don't know if you'll believe me, but Adam's different now. He doesn't talk about money anymore. He actually listens when people at the shelter tell their stories. Maybe he's changing." I sipped my tea, watching the child play. "Maybe," I said quietly. "But change doesn't erase what's been done. It only builds what comes next." Claire nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I just hope he learns." "So do I whispered. Now when I think back to that night in the kitchen, to his mocking words, "Crawl if you want food," I don't feel the sting I once did. I feel fire. Because that moment did not break me. It woke me. Adam wanted me on my knees. Instead, he found himself bent in front of the world, forced to answer for his greed. And me? I stand taller now, not because my body is stronger, but because my spirit refuses to bow. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: they can take your comfort, they can try to steal your name, your dignity, your legacy. But they cannot take your will, not unless you hand it to them. And I never will. I am Ruth Morgan. I am 78 years old. And I will never crawl.